back. I'm now joined by Allen Simpson, Managing Director of Strategy and Corporate Affairs at London and Partners. Thank you for joining us, Allen. And I'd like to begin by asking you, given the spike in COVID cases, the high daily death rates and the extensive lockdown in UK at the moment, when do you think the situation will be better and the UK economy will be able to bounce back?
Yeah, and clearly the first and most important thing is getting the public health response right. And I think it's very impressive that the UK has been so quick in getting the vaccines into people's arms. And actually my wife is a nurse and today is at work delivering the vaccines herself. I think economic recovery will come very quickly. We have looked quite hard to see what happens around the world when you have these public health events. And our clear view is that economic recovery comes back quite swiftly when people feel confidence that the public health challenge is dealt with. And actually, just to give you an early example of that, the day after the AstraZeneca vaccine was announced, bookings for travel to London went up 100% in a day. So there's clear demand, which we think will come back swiftly.
Okay, so you do see swift demand returning, but what are the sectors you'd bet on for revival?
It depends on the sector. So tech, for example, which is a sector that London has a lot of strength alongside cities like Bengaluru, Mumbai and others, is as strong now as it has been ever. So I think we will see continued growth in those sectors. For tourism, I think we are looking the second half of this year, but you know, that's tomorrow in terms of people's bookings. So we are already seeing bookings for tourism come back. For tech, though, the picture has been bright throughout the last year because, of course, tech has helped to solve so many of these problems. And I think some of the investment which we will see flood into the economy in London and elsewhere in the next year will be particularly focused on technology.
All right, so you believe London will find ways to adapt and thrive in some sectors, like you say. But what opportunities will this present for India in particular?
Well, I think London will thrive on the same basis that it already has, and that's through partnership with the most innovative places in the world. And of course, that means India. So last year, India was our second largest market for international investment, larger than Europe. So we really do see India as being a key part of our future strength. And that's particularly built on technology because Bengaluru, the fastest growing tech ecosystem over the last 4 years in the world. Mumbai, pretty unique in holding up its amount of tech investment last year. We really do see the future for London as being about a place where the best innovators from India can come to London to work with the best innovators from the US. Because our strength has always been our internationalism. Yes, we've got great domestic technology, domestic strength. But it's by bringing people from across the world together in those high innovation sectors like technology that I think we will thrive.
Allen, could you give us more details about the technology-driven investment that you've just mentioned?
I think it's in two directions, isn't it? One is fintech, so the technology which is bringing banking closer to all of us and making it easier for us to do our banking cheaply and efficiently on our mobile phones and in our homes. And that's an area where India has always been very strong and is increasingly strong. And it's bringing real innovation to London to partner with the best innovation that we have here. The second, though, interestingly, I think is urban technology. So as we all grapple with how to make our cities greener and cleaner, I think Indian expertise in green technology is going to be increasingly important. And I can imagine much deeper partnership between our most innovative businesses and India's most innovative businesses in solving some of those problems. Because, of course, history shows that the tech companies which grow to scale most quickly are the companies who are solving really important societal challenges. And we've seen that in the last year. And I do think that fintech and green tech will be key parts of that.
Do you believe innovation-led growth and investment will truly be the way forward?
Well, regardless of Brexit, the UK's trade and investment market was shifting east and south. That was absolutely clear. We as London and Partners, the trade and investment agency for London, have focused our efforts on India and China in particular and have significantly increased our investments in those two giant economies in the last 3-4 years, and that will continue to be the case. I think it absolutely is the case that the major innovation-led growth is coming from perhaps a limited number of countries who are all quite close together. So India, China, Indonesia will increasingly be economically important to Europe, I think. Japan, of course. So these are the countries which will drive our the reality of our trade and investment, and therefore they will drive our commercial diplomacy. So from the UK's perspective, broadly, yes, of course, those countries. From London's perspective in particular, we are very focused on India and China as the two core drivers.
India has been invited by the United Kingdom to attend the G7 summit, with India also being hailed as the pharmacy of the world. Tell us about India-UK ties in particular.
Well, the pandemic is nobody's fault, and I think it's really important to say that we, as a world, have experienced it together, we've solved it together. I think, from my perspective, though, the key is how we recover. And you mentioned the strength in pharmaceuticals that India has, and I gave you a practical example of how that's directly affected our ability to get vaccines up and running so quickly through India's role in AstraZeneca. And I feel very profoundly that although it's been a very difficult year, it's recovery that has to be our focus now. And clearly India's strength in urban and green technology, in fintech technology, in pharmaceuticals are all things which have helped us to solve the problems of the last year, but more importantly, they will help us to power growth as well.
All right. Lastly, what's your message for the youth, Allen? Will the focus also shift on easing visa regulations and job creation?
So students are incredibly important to our strategy because, I had this sort of dream that imagine a young Indian family comes to the UK on holiday. Their oldest daughter says, I love it here. I want to do my master's at a London university. Comes here, studies engineering, goes back to Bengaluru, sets up a business and brings it to London. So it's incredibly strategically important. The challenge, though, has always been about post-study visas. And the government have made steps to make that easier. And London and partners are currently working on some projects to particularly help graduates from London universities to access jobs in high growth companies. Because, of course, if you come and study, if you're an Indian student that comes to study in London and then wants to get a job at JP Morgan or BAE Systems or Barclays Bank, that's reasonably easy to do because they have such strong HR, human resources and hiring processes. What we're focusing on is using the government's new post-study visa rules to help those high caliber graduates who we've been able to welcome to London to get jobs at smaller high growth companies as well. And I think that will be very important because, of course, we both know that today's young people want to be in exciting new companies. They don't necessarily want to be in some of the older ones. So that I think is a really key thing. But it is incredibly important for London that we make the route from studying in London to working in London as close as possible. And also the route from studying in London to setting up a business back home and bringing it to London. Both of those two things really matter.
All right. Thank you so much for this interaction. Thank you for joining us.